to RiskScout's webinar, Beyond Detection, Building a Holistic Real-Time Defense Against Check Fraud. We are so excited to have you joining us today. Now, before we do dive into today's webinar content, we've got a quick couple housekeeping items we'd like to roll through. RiskScout will be sharing all of today's webinar resources in a follow-up email tomorrow morning, so be sure to keep an eye on your inbox. We also want this session to be as valuable for you as possible, so we encourage you to ask any questions that you may have throughout the session in the questions section of the webinar panel on the side of your screen. We'll also be running a few polls throughout today's webinar to better understand our audience, so your participation is greatly appreciated. Now, if it is your first time joining us here, RiskScout is a team of former bank examiners, BSA professionals, and fintech developers helping financial institutions grow to become more efficient and profitable. Through a full BSA, AML, and fraud suite, RiskScout solutions increase revenue and decrease compliance costs and losses by unlocking new deposit streams, automating compliance workflows, and catching fraudsters. If you're interested in learning more about how we help community banks and credit unions every day, visit riskscout.com and get in touch. Now, RiskScout recently announced some new fraud functionality that's coming to the platform. On the next slide here, you'll see that these rules and integrations help financial institutions of all sizes fight wire fraud, ACH fraud, elder financial abuse, new account fraud, and more, alongside our existing BSA AML suite. Now, if we jump ahead one slide, we'll be able to see that RiskScout has actually partnered with Mitek Systems, who's providing us with today's webinar content. We've done that to bring RiskScout customers integrated check fraud detection to catch fraudulent checks and prevent losses without having to leave the RiskScout platform. If you'd like to see these exciting new features in action, visit riskscout.com to read the press release and to get yourself a demo. All right, one slide ahead. We will see that next month, RiskScout is bringing you Beyond the Buzzword, the do's and don'ts of AI and AML. AI is everywhere, but in BSA AML, not all AI is created equal. From flashy promises that don't deliver to real-world tools that save hours of busy work, knowing the difference is critical for BSA officers and back office teams. Join Ryan McInerney, a former OCC bank examiner, to learn how to vet vendors on their AI and machine learning tools, to tackle data and privacy concerns, and find the AI strategy that works for your AML program. Visit riskscout.com and save your seat. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today's webinar will be led by none other than Derek Abbott, the Senior Business Intelligence and Strategy Manager at Mitek Systems. Derek brings years of experience in banking and a deep commitment to fighting fraud and supporting victims to Mitek, where he partners with fraud prevention teams across financial institutions of all sizes, developing advanced detection strategies to stay ahead of evolving threats. His frontline insights also help shape Mitek's product innovations, ensuring cutting-edge solutions for fraud mitigation. We are so excited to have him joining us here today. Now, without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it over to Derek to dive into today's content. Derek, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. And thanks, everyone, for having me here today. You know, a big part of my day-to-day role here at Mitek is to actually meet with the people on the front lines, you know, the people that are fighting the fraud, and which is really why I'm excited to be here talking with you all. I have been in the banking space pretty much for as long as I have legally been able to have a job. I started as a teller and worked my way up all the way to an assistant branch manager before making a jump and moving into the banking software and support space. I've been in banking for a little over 19 years now, and can say that I'm probably more of a fraud nerd now than I was when I really started. To me, you know, there's nothing more exciting than digging into a case or an alert and kind of doing the research and really understanding, you know, what's going on there. Before I really get into the presentation today, I kind of just want to give a quick overview of who Mitek Systems is and what we're up to. First, we're not new to the game at all. We were founded back in 1986, and today we're actually a publicly traded company under the ticker symbol MITK. Most people here will probably know us as the inventors of mobile deposit, but we're actually also a trusted name in the digital identity verification and check fraud prevention space. Our technology is used at scale. More than 80 million consumers have accessed services powered by Mitek, whether that's account opening, identity verification, or securely depositing a check. Our client base is actually contains over 7,000 different institutions, such as banks and fintechs, using Mitek solutions every single day across 150 countries. And then when it comes to check processing, we have an enormous footprint. There's been over 5 billion checks that have been processed in North America using our technology. We're also really an innovation-driven company. We hold 107 patents related to image science, with another 21 currently pending, which to me really shows that we have an ongoing investment in R&D in our future here. Beyond innovation and behind of the innovation, we actually have a global team of about 650 employees, which also include 75 in-house, what we call forensic document examiners, which are what we call, in the field, they're experts who bring deep fraud and document expertise. They're heavily leveraged on the identity side, as well as we're building out new features and models on the check fraud prevention space. Okay, to state the obvious, fraud is still a huge problem within the United States. And because of this, as I'm sure everyone here knows, fraud prevention is the #1 spending and investment priority for most financial institutions today. According to a survey recently done by the ABA, 46% of bank and fintech leaders cited check fraud as a top concern for 2025. Community banks actually have a bigger concern, with 64% viewing check fraud as a major risk. And then according to a Datos white paper, 60% of consumers said that they would look to switch banks following a fraud event on their account. And even further, 62% of consumers expect their institution to catch and prevent fraud from ever impacting them, so before post. I don't really think that any of these points are going to be surprising, right? To me, this is just kind of proves that the continuing investment in fraud and kind of what's happening in the space these days is warranted, and that new technology, and investments in technology are going to be needed to kind of stay ahead of the market and stay ahead of fraud. So as I kind of thought of where I wanted to start and kind of where I wanted to take the journey today, I kind of looked back over the past few years, kind of thinking, where check fraud has come from, at least from when I've been involved, and kind of where it is now. And as I've watched it evolve over the past few years, I think what really surprised me the most is how fraudsters are actually willing and want to work together to help. This slide right here is just a reminder that fraud doesn't happen in the shadows anymore, like dark web or places like that. It happens really in plain sight. The screenshots here are from a few different Telegram and Facebook channels that I keep an eye on a daily basis. And and what you can see, they're actually openly advertising stolen checks, fake IDs, and services that related to fraud, as if this was just like a normal store. In some cases, some of these channels I've actually seen grow to post hundreds of stolen checks on a daily basis. And along with those checks, we also see things like images, dollar amounts, details about accounts, internet vendors, addresses where to pick them up. They offer shipping services, cooking services. All of this stuff is just offered out in the plain open. To kind of provide some insights and some background into the scale of, specifically on Telegram, last year it was estimated that there were over 2 million checks posted for sale. 2 million checks. So that's 2 million checks that were mailed that never made it to who they were written out to. People making payments, donations, paying taxes. So all of those checks were stopped in the mail. According to FinCEN, it was estimated that in 6 months in 2024, there was $688 million in losses that were actually tied to mail theft check fraud. For those of you that don't know what Telegram is, it's a free messaging app that has an emphasis on large group chats and anonymous channels, which is perfect for what fraudsters are doing here. It is estimated that even today, even though recently there was a giant crackdown on Telegram, there are still thousands of fraud-related channels that are both public and private. In these screenshots, you'll see things like fraudsters helping each other. The screenshot on the left is actually for the beginners. It's an FAQ about what is a check. How do funds get moved around with checks? How do you leverage a check? How do you write a check? That's just some of the example of things that you can find very easily on some of these Telegram channels. But what this really does, and what this kind of shows me, and this kind of tells me is, fraud is no longer a one-off. It's become an organized industry, really. Again, you have fraudsters that are offering different pieces of the service. You have, insiders that are stealing the checks, that are providing the checks. You then have the people that are offering to, doctor the checks, cook the checks. You have people that are offering to ship them for you. So it's a whole industry. It's not just one-off people going out and doing this anymore. And second, the barriers to entry have never been lower. Anyone with a smartphone and an app like Telegram or Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, can buy and sell stolen financial data. And as you can see by this screenshot here on the right, even a monkey can get in and do it. Another piece that's really interesting to me is recently I have really started to notice a large shift in the type of institutions that are being targeted. While there will always be people looking to commit fraud against the big guys like Citibank, aka Biddy, or Chase, aka Chevy, or Wells, also known as Welly on Telegram, the fraudsters are now branching out and moving into the credit union and community bank space. As I've been diving in and kind of reading some of the communications that I see on these channels, one thing I believe the shift that causes this shift is really this belief to fraudsters that these smaller institutions don't have the technology or staff in place to help prevent the fraud, and they just think that they are easier targets. Why are they doing it? You'll see here I posted some more screenshots that I took from some of these channels that just go to show what you see on a daily basis. Rewards, right? These fraudsters are showing off. These are posts of stacks of cash, fancy cars, watches, luxury goods, really bragging about what they've gotten out of check fraud and why they're still in it. It really is like proof of selling, of what they're selling, and it's almost their own marketing. Low risk versus high reward. From the perspective of a fraudster, the math just makes sense. A stolen check can be sold or deposited for thousands of dollars potentially, and the chance of being caught is extremely low. The imbalance, low risk, high reward, is what really keeps fueling this cycle and keeps these markets alive. The idea of social proof and recruitment. So by flaunting, in all these photos, they're flaunting their success. And it's just normalizing the behavior. They make it look easy, they make it attainable, and it draws in people who are desperate for money. If you look at the last picture on the right for a minute, what you see is someone in one of these channels who's new to committing check fraud. And he is actually posting his questions and concerns because he got an alert in the mobile app saying, hey, we're actually going to try to verify these funds. We're placing a hold on the account. So you can see there's a little bit of panic in his messages looking for some sort of insights. And what I couldn't fit in was the messages he got back. They were talking about, hey, this is normal. Don't worry about it. This is what a hold is. This is what this message means. They also started talking about the strategy of when you're finding a bank to start defrauding, to look for local routing numbers that are in that area. That way the check will clear faster. Conversations then started up about stimulus payments, money orders, cashier's checks. So again, these fraudsters know what they're doing. It's not just people guessing anymore. They know, oh, hey, if you're in Massachusetts, you should focus on these routing numbers because these are local. And this is just kind of what's happening these days. I also want to focus on this second image for a second, second from the right. You'll see, a lot of people, and one of the real ways that these channels become popular is feedback. people are always looking to help each other out, and they're looking to post feedback, say, hey, this was a good one, or this check went through. So again, a lot of this is all about marketing. The fraudsters are doing their best to market the product that they're selling. And since they can't go out in public and say, hey, this is what we're doing, their Telegram channels and this is the feedback, and this is the important part of their channel. Okay, so the last few slides I have talked about, how checks are stolen, where they're being sold, but what happens with them, right? This is the next piece. So once a check is taken, once a check gets sold for a fraction of the value, how does that check actually make it into your workflow? How does it get deposited? How is it being altered or counterfeited? I wanted to show you a quick process that one day I was messing around here at Mitek, trying to figure out what is going on and how this is being done at such scale. So on the slide here, there really are just 4 steps you need to alter a check. A lot of institutions, as I'm speaking and doing onboardings and strategy sessions, a lot of these banks are always assumed that you need like a fancy computer or Photoshop and a nice printer. But honestly, that's not the case, especially with today's technology. What used to require specialized skills can now be done, honestly, with just 2 cell phones. And this is why it's so easy, right? It's 4 steps. Step 1, and we'll kind of go over this quickly. Step 1, and here's a picture of a check that is taken out of the mail. Now, this is just a sample check that I was using in the office one day to kind of test out some theories that I had. But to me, just take the check. Step 2 is to capture the check on a cell phone. So I have an iPhone, so I use my iPhone camera app, and I captured it in black and white just because a lot of the times at the end of the day, all the color images are transferred to black and white TIFF anyway. So I just took a picture of it, converted it to black and white. Step 3 is I actually took that on my iPhone and altered it right in the photo app. So I added my name using a font that looks like handwriting. I took the dollar amount from 100 and changed it to 10,000. Again, using font. So I'm not even trying to draw or erase. I'm just putting it right over those fields. And the same thing with the legal amount. So again, I altered the payee, the amount, and the courtesy amount right on my phone. I then took a second phone and just took a picture of my iPhone. And you'll see in number 4, that is what it looks like. Now, to someone looking quickly at the check, or someone just, for a bank that's quickly flipping through items and moving on, that's probably not going to stand out. One thing that really stood out to me, and one thing I've seen a lot of through, coming through the consortium, is with these checks that are altered, is this little, oval here. And for the longest time, I had no idea what it was. But I recently discovered, as I was going through this exercise here, that's actually my iPhone speaker. So when I take a picture of my iPhone on the other phone, because I had to zoom it in a certain way to make it look like a real check, it captures my iPhone speaker and then leaves it there as an artifact on the image. But I mean, as you see in step 4, that check looks pretty good. Like, you would never know if you weren't comparing things like handwriting or fonts. If it's a business check, it probably wouldn't be caught because the pay or block is untouched. The majority of the features that are on standard check stock analysis aren't being touched at all. So again, this is as simple as 4 steps using 2 phones with a stolen image, and this is kind of how you can get away with it. So I always like to drive that home that, committing fraud is not difficult. It can be done with minimal technology and minimal experience. So now that we've altered the check, it gets deposited into the system, it runs through. But I also wanted to talk about something that's not check fraud related directly, but account takeover just quickly. Because I'm kind of focusing on the Telegram aspect of it, one of the things that I also follow is a lot of account takeover and ID theft channels. There are numerous channels out there that are selling what they call logs, which are pretty much just online banking login credentials. From there, fraudsters either go the route of getting debit cards mailed to them, and they make purchases to kind of deplete the account. Or what I've seen a lot of is they leverage third-party check services. They don't use the bank's online banking because that would trigger some sort of red flag immediately. But what they do is they connect the account routing, routing account number and a couple of pieces of information. They connect it to these third-party services that they can then start having checks cut from. One thing you'll notice is that a lot of these checks will always look the same. They have the same type of layout. For example, you'll notice on both of these checks, there's a box around the signature, which is not normal for this type of account. The courtesy amount is big and bold and large. Another thing that always stands out on these checks, and also stands out on a lot of fraud we see, is the memo line. For some reason, and I always joke, for some reason fraudsters think if they put something in the memo line, it will actually help them get away with fraud. So we've seen things like authorized payment, approved payment. We've even seen not fraud written in the memo line before, with the fraudsters hoping that they can get away and get that check passed through the system. So here at Mitek, we have worked diligently to continue to bring new signals into Check Fraud Defender, whether it's through our identity product or through check and payments. But one signal that's brought a huge impact into what we're doing here today, and it's been a great partnership so far, is through a third party that we leverage called Dark Tower. Dark Tower actually spends their days surfing Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, dark web channels, and they're gathering stolen check images for us. We take those images every single day and we kind of do our normal processing. So we data lift everything off of them. We then try to do some matching on our side to see if we can match and back into profiles that belong to certain customers. And I'll talk about profiles and things like that further down in the presentation. But what's interesting about this and how this ties back into Telegram and mail theft and check fraud is leveraging data we get from them. I was able to start mapping out cases and create some timelines to present here. So you'll notice on this timeline, January 22nd, a mailbox was reported vandalized or broken into in one of the areas that they focus on geographically. January 24th, a $4,500 check that was presumed to be from that mailbox due to its location was listed on Telegram for only $250. On the 29th, that's kind of when the fraud really started happening. So multiple altered checks were processed through mobile deposit. It was a total of $11,300. And then on the 30th, there were then multiple skilled counterfeit items presented, totaling around $64,000. By skilled counterfeit, what I mean was the layout was pretty much perfect. The payer block was complete and correct. The signature was it was correct. Everything was in the right location. So almost, it was almost an exact match. The only difference was that on these checks, the borders and the security features were incorrect. Because what fraudsters are doing, and I will say, luckily fraudsters don't realize yet, fraudsters are always going out and buying check stock and printing on it. What they don't realize is, and like I showed previously, you could just take a black and white image, doctor it, and then send it through mobile, for example, mobile deposit or remote deposit capture or any of those channels where there's no human intervention involved, and that will make it right through. So again, the fraud is getting better because they are no longer guessing. They have the images, they know what they're supposed to look like, they know what they're trying to counterfeit or alter or forge. So now it's just the fraud's getting better, and that's kind of what we're seeing. And then within Check Fraud Defender, the last piece for this one account in particular was on February 3rd, we actually started getting closed account returns. So what that kind of shows is it took 13 days from when a mailbox was vandalized and broken into to an account being closed. And within that time period, there was like $75,000 in fraud on one account. So that's just kind of how quick fraud happens here. Just some quick insights from some of the data we have from Check Fraud Defender. It's important to note kind of what Check Fraud Defender is and how we're getting these numbers. Check Fraud Defender is a consortium, meaning what we do is every bank that uses us agrees to do on-us detection, but at the same time, as part of that, they get access to all of our profiles that we built for all of our other institutions. So you're getting examples of known good checks for banks and accounts across the United States. So we have well over 100 banks feeding into the consortium now, and that kind of gives us some interesting insights into what's going on. On the left-hand side, fraud by source by percent. This makes perfect sense to me when you kind of think about it, right? The number one, if I'm not including in clearing, is going to be mobile deposit. So that is where the largest percentage of fraud return reasons we get in our data is for mobile deposit on the deposit side. It then goes ATM and teller. So again, when you're kind of thinking of fraud and fraudsters on a whole, they try not to have to work with people, right? They don't want to have to talk to a teller. They don't want to have to go into a branch if they don't have to. So they're going through mobile and ATM. To me, that makes perfect sense. And the reason in clearing is such a huge piece of it is, one person's deposit fraud is another person's in clearing fraud. So you kind of take these numbers and it just kind of makes sense as to what's going on and the nature of fraud these days. From a fraud type breakdown on the right-hand side, alterations number one. If you look a few years ago, it was almost 100% counterfeit. Everyone was just doing counterfeits, whether they were skilled, unskilled. There were minimal forgeries, people stealing checkbooks, but the majority of it was counterfeit. Now that's completely flipped. With the mail theft and the ease of altering checks, it just makes sense that alterations now number one. Counterfeits number two. It's a close second, but alterations have kind of made the jump and are now, larger, having a larger impact in the fraud ecosystem.
All righty, that brings us to our first poll question. As we just saw from Derek, we know what the numbers are when we're looking at a consortium high-level view, but we want to know what your numbers are. This poll question that you should see popping up on your screen now says, what deposit channel is your biggest concern for check fraud? That could be mobile deposit, ATM, in-branch, RDC, or maybe honestly, you're just not quite sure. It's been a minute since you've looked through that. You're not familiar with that data set. No worries at all. We want to hear from y'all and maybe can see just how closely our audience today resembles the overall consortium insights. We'll give y'all just a couple more seconds to get your responses in. All righty. Okay, let's turn this around and take a peek at it. Derek, it looks like we've got an overwhelming result here with almost 3/4 of our audience saying that mobile deposit is their number one. I guess that's not super surprising to what we just saw on your slide. That's followed up by business remote deposit capture. And then we have a tied for a third place there, in branch and maybe just not being fully sure. Finally, last but not least, ATM being that channel for the biggest concern for check fraud. Derek, I'm curious, how does this stack up to what you were expecting to see?
This is exactly what I was expecting to see, actually. Like I said, the fraudsters, what they're trying to do is they're trying to not have to talk to people. So they're doing what they can to get around it. So mobile, RDC, ATMs, that's the best way to not have to, put that check in front of somebody. So again, this lines up perfectly with what I was expecting to see too.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your responses. And Derek, I'll throw it back to you to keep rolling.
Yeah. So what is happening, right? Again, we just spoke about mobile and ATM being two threat vectors that are being attacked nonstop. So I mean, what are we seeing from a consortium standpoint with what do these images look like? What are the fraudsters actually sending in? What are we kind of fighting on a day-to-day basis? So a lot of the fraud we're seeing, it's not that great. I know I showed you some examples of how to alter checks, but at the same time, what we're seeing a lot of is we have fraudsters just attacking channels and trying to flood them and get away with whatever they can before they move on. Pictures of a picture. So again, if you look at that top image, that's actually a picture of a check that was on someone's computer. They altered it on their computer, but they didn't actually try to hide anything behind it. They just took a picture and they got the background. They got a folder behind it. Online check images or print screen images. The middle picture, what it is it's actually someone mailed this check through email, and it got through, and you can actually see in the bar, which is right here, you can actually see the URL that they downloaded the Google image from. So again, there's not really trying to hide anything. It's just taking a picture right on their phone or from their computer. We are seeing a ton of front and back mismatches. And what I mean by that is there's a fraudulent check, and then the back doesn't even match. It's either a piece of paper, it's just a picture of a keyboard, they're just signing their name. So again, when you're kind of doing an image compare, you can kind of see those differences. So really, what we're seeing is fraudsters are just, like I said, going out and trying to commit as much fraud as they can. They are trying to flood different channels. They're trying to flood different banks until they get stopped, and then they move on to the next one. A lot of the times what we're seeing and what the consortium data kind of shows us is fraudsters are actually just attacking regionally. So for example, if they're in a certain city that has 2 or 3 big banks or 2 or 3 medium-sized banks, they're actually just sending the same images and the same checks to all of them and hoping they get through. So that's kind of where it gets interesting to start looking at the data from a consortium standpoint and from a higher level standpoint, because then you can see, oh wait, this check's already been cashed at another bank, or this was deposited here and now it's coming here. So it gives you insights into kind of where things are and where they are in the timeline. Another huge trend that we're seeing right now is funds availability and fraudsters trying to get around funds availability. We have noticed in our data that there are a lot of fraud checks that come in close to midnight because they think, the fraudster that's committing it thinks that, oh, if I go an ATM at like 11:58 or 11:59 to deposit this check, it's going to be available at 12 o'clock or 12:01. So there's misconceptions about what funds availability actually is. But there also are some fraudsters that actually know about funds availability and know how to take advantage of it. For example, we recently saw some USPS money orders come through for $100,000. Now, any banker will know that they're only valid up to $1,000. But what the fraudsters are doing are they're taking these known routing numbers. So I think that was 8002. You guys can let me know if I'm wrong. But they took that routing number, they put it on a random check. So it wasn't even a USPS money order. Their thought was, well, if it has that routing number on there, we're going to get our funds faster and we can withdraw them and before anyone notices. So that's just one of the many trends that we see now where people are trying to take advantage of funds availability. In the branch, there is a ton of fraud on non-customer check cashing. So pretty much a non-customer goes up to a branch, they say, I have a check drawn on you, I want to cash it. And in the end, that's either a synthetic identity or, and that check is fraudulent. So by the time the bank realizes it that night, that person's already walked out with the cash. They may have paid a $5 to $10 fee for being a non-customer, but they cashed that fake check and then they walked out and they left with the money. That is one of the #1 problems that we're seeing right now. And again, it's just when you don't have any sort of protection at the teller line or any sort of real-time validations, you're just open for attack, which is why we always talk about the need to implement a system at time of capture, prevent it before it even happens, right? Before it even impacts your customer, just stop it at the door. You'll see a lot of the checks. Again, if you look at the memo line, they have indicators there, final payment. A lot of them, again, are going to have things like, a payment approved, authorized payment, just because they're creating those checks and they're hoping that with something like that, the teller's going to cash it and think it's okay. We also see a lot of signals that show us that they're actually using the same check stock. So some things that we've thought about and are starting to implement on the Mitek side is this idea of like bad, right? So we know this is going to be bad because we've seen these combinations of things. And that's kind of some of the stuff that we've started to build out just to kind of provide protections here. Where, for example, if you look at both of the checks on the screen, you'll notice they have the same security features, the same border, the same, certain pieces of the layout are the same. So we're able to start picking up on these trends to kind of alert on it before the money actually walks out the door. Because at the end of the day, that's what's most important. Prevent it before it happens. That way it's not impacting your customers. It looks like we might have another poll.
Yes, we do. That should be popping up on your screen now. We are curious at what the time looks like. How much time are you spending investigating suspected check fraud cases every single week? We know we've got different asset sizes on this call. I'm sure this will vary a little bit. So that could be as little as 2 hours, all the way up to being more than 10 hours per week investigating some of these check fraud. I'm already seeing some of these results come in, and let me tell you, it's a little bit more varied than I would have thought it would have been, which is very interesting. I'll give you all a couple more seconds before we turn these around and let Derek speak to it and see just how long the average person on this call is taking to investigate these checks. All right, we've got a majority here. So let's go ahead and turn it around. And we can see that 35%, which is the largest category we have, spending between 2 and 5 hours looking into those checks. A place for second here would be less than 2 hours. Hopefully not a whole lot of check fraud going on there. And then 5 to 10 hours, with our minority being 13%, over 10 hours per week spent investigating suspicious checks. Derek, like you said, you work with institutions every single day. How does this stack up to what you were expecting to hear?
Yeah, no, this makes a whole lot of sense too. Looking at who, the asset sizes and what we have in our audience, to me, it makes sense. One of the sayings we have here at Mitek is we need to get away from reviewing suspects and need to start reviewing fraud. So, the first half of the presentation that I've been kind of talking through is what's happening today in the industry and what are we seeing a lot of. For the next few slides, I kind of just want to talk about, the partnership between RiskScout and Mitek and why we're excited to be a part of this great solution you guys have out there and what we think we can bring. Again, because, today it's all about reviewing suspects. It's when you're kind of thinking about the nature of a fraud system, it really is, people just accept that there's going to be false positives. It's just the nature of doing business. The majority of what you're going to be reviewing are just false positives due to things like business rules or business requirements. We have to review everything over X. Or for institutions that are just leveraging transaction analysis, that's only one small piece of the puzzle, right? So in order to kind of get to where you move away from reviewing suspects and you're reviewing fraud, you have to leverage more technology. And you have to leverage technology that's looking at more than just the transaction, and image is a very important piece of that. So again, from doing implementations in the past and talking with multiple customers and non-customers and people looking to add more technology to their tech stack and their fraud solution, those numbers make perfect sense to me. So, when we're talking about, and you're going to hear me, and I've probably already said it multiple times, stop the fraud before it leaves the door, right? Because it's very important from a customer experience standpoint to not let that money even leave that account. To a lot of people, even a $100 fraud scenario is going to be impactful for them. So the way of attacking this issue here at Mitek is we invested a lot of time in what we're calling real time, because just like any other fraud channel and fraud type, if you stop fraud at the in-clearing, at one door, it's going to come in the other door. So the whole idea behind Check Fraud Defender is we provide like a holistic approach to check fraud, and we're not just stopping it at one channel. We're providing detection and prevention at all channels. And again, this is kind of the way of saving customer experience, preventing losses. Again, you just need to have an overall detection solution here to kind of prevent fraud across the board. Mobile detection, mobile deposit's now the most common, deposit channel. It's convenient for consumers, but it's also a favorite for the fraudsters just because they don't have to have the face-to-face anymore, and they can test and alter items quickly and at scale. That fraud case with the timeline I was talking about for the $11,500, they were all checks under $500. And what the fraudsters were doing was they were taking and depositing very small items at scale just to see what they could get away with. That bank in particular, they weren't using any sort of imaging solution in the real-time side, and by the time they caught up with it, it was around 11,500, I believe, was caught. ATMs. So again, ATMs are one of those channels that's kind of overlooked. They're still a target. A lot of the times, and I say they're overlooked, it's just because the technology there that runs in the ATM hasn't been changed in years. They're not running the newer, operating systems that ATMs leverage. And to update and push out any sort of update to an ATM, it's a lot of work. So fraudsters can deposit outside the branch hours, like I said, a lot of times trying to take advantage of the cutoff in funds availability and get away with the money before anyone realizes. In-branch activity. So in branch, it used to be considered very safe because, fraudsters are trying not to go face-to-face and have to be in person with any sort of prevention specialist, which I feel like that's kind of where the industry is going. Tellers are now, not only tellers are they're not just accepting deposits. Tellers are now also responsible for sales, and they also have some responsibility around fraud. Does this check pass that? Does it pass your gut check, right? Do you think it's okay? We see a lot of interest in leveraging Check Fraud Defender in the branch because of things like insider fraud, or if we're talking in Telegram speak, innies, right? So there are tellers that may potentially be involved in some risky activity and are accepting deposits or cashing checks they shouldn't be. By having a system in place that automates it and does some sort of analysis for you, that can kind of help, right? It helps prevent any sort of potential fraud or losses there. RDC, commercial clients depositing batches of checks through RDC. There's because it's such a high volume channel for some of these larger customers, especially, a lot of the customers that are leveraging RDC are very large companies or corporations. So there's chances are the checks are also very large. Layered protection there is also just very important, just to provide any sort of protection. So here, again, I keep saying over and over again, it's very important to have some sort of real-time coverage across all the channels, because fraudsters are going to be moving from channel to channel, especially when they realize that, hey, we're being stopped at this channel now, let's move to ATM or let's move to mobile. So they're always going to be trying the best to kind of get through. Moving beyond this idea of on us. At Mitek, what we like to say is a check is a check to us. No matter where, when you're sending us an image, for example, we don't care if it's drawn on your bank, another bank, as if they're a member of our consortium and we have profiles for them, we treat them all as on us for you. So you can send us images on your deposits, you can send us images through your in-clearing, and again, we're going to score them all as they all are your profiles. Day zero decisioning. And what I mean by that is, let's process those files and let's get you items to look at, let's get you fraud to look at same day. So as soon as you're getting either, if you're running batches, so you're getting batch files from your ATMs or your different channels, send them to us, we return results in a few minutes. If we're talking real time, so teller, mobile, ATM, we return results sub-second, meaning you send us an image, we score that and return a fraud risk for you within a second, which then allows you to kind of stop it right at the door. Business rules are also very important, and that's actually what my team focuses on. We work with all of our institutions and we build fraud strategies to help them detect and prevent losses. So we understand, daily volumes and what reviewers are comfortable working, and we help design strategies that can kind of provide exactly what the bank is looking for. Looks like we have another poll.
That's right. All right, you all should see this popping up on your screen now. I know Derek's already talked a lot about the consortium approach, but we're really curious on how you're collaborating with your peers or other financial institutions to help fight back against this check fraud. And we talked about that industry consortium and shared intelligence, but we also know that there are things like informal peer outreach or relying on your vendors, whether that's Mitek or RiskScout or somebody else, to share some data with you. Or maybe there's the final option there, which we're not currently collaborating, whether that's a lack of resources or time or effort, whatever it may be. We'd love to hear how y'all are approaching collaboration when it comes to these kind of fraud events that we're seeing more and more frequently. Give you just a couple more seconds to get these answers in. All righty. Okay, well, let's turn this around. Looks like we got a tie here for first place. The majority of folks that are on our call today are leveraging an informal peer outreach and or relying on their vendors to share that data there. That's followed by not collaborating at all. About a quarter of the folks on our call today simply aren't doing it. And then 17% there are relying on systems like Mitek for those industry consortium approach there. Derek, how does this align with what you were expecting to see?
No, this is again right online. It's nice to know that what I think is happening in the industry is actually where we are. If you were to look back 5-10 years ago, no one wanted to share data, right? No one wanted to talk. Everyone was fighting fraud by themselves. They didn't want to share strategies, how they were doing it, how they were being successful. That's not the case anymore. We host monthly strategy meetings where all of our clients come together, and no one, there's not 1 minute of quiet. The second we get on the call, people are talking, hey, what are you doing for rules to catch this? Or, how are you leveraging the technology for that? The market's changing. So is the technology, and it's great to see, because as my slides about the Telegram, you can see the fraudsters are collaborating. We have to collaborate too, just to kind of shut them down and move on.
That's great. Well said. And thank you all for sharing those insights.
So I know I only have a few minutes left here, so I'm going to kind of move quickly through a couple of these slides. Just kind of talking about Check Fraud Defender. What we do is we always say all checks, all channels, anytime. And by that, what we mean is we want your checks, whether they're from mobile deposit, RDC, ATM, branch, remote deposit, in clearing, check cashing, in-branch check cashing. We want all your volume because we can help detect fraud at all channels in real time. Shut it down before it happens. I'll say that over and over again. I was a banker I worked in a branch for 7 years, and I've been in banking technology my whole life. It's all about customer experience, so stop it before it even happens. Not only does it save, face with the customer, but it saves the bank itself as well, or the institution itself. With Check Fraud Defender, we completely host the solution, so there's no hardware needed at the institution level. We're an AWS shop, meaning we host everything in Amazon, so we pass all SOC 2 and all of those different audits that are required to be a solution. What we're doing is we're having a consortium of check profiles, and again, what that means is for every client that comes on, we build profiles for every unique account and routing number combination at your bank. So as you're feeding us data, we're actually building a profile of what we'll call known good. So for example, in my profile for one of my accounts, it would be my wife and I. So we would have examples of both of our signatures. Our handwriting is going to be different, so we would have different examples of handwriting. We would have a check stock example in there because, again, all those different pieces of the check represent the known good for that account. And for each account, we automatically build profiles. We also bring in compromised data. I mentioned that Dark Tower partnership as part of an additional signal into check fraud. They're bringing us stolen checks. They're bringing us stolen synthetic IDs, account takeover screens, all this different data that we're able to link back to different profiles that we have in our system that just give us another indication of risk, right? When we see something like that, we know, hey, this item might not be fraud, but there's more risk on this account because we know there's stuff for sale. Again, dark web data, check profiles, all of that is for processing. And then at the end of the day, after doing our processing, so whether it's batch or real time, those results get fed into RiskScout's check fraud module, and you can actually review them right there. You'll have insights into what we compare against, what scored high, what scored low, and you can make a decision right in that screen. Because this is an image-based solution, what are we looking at on the check? We look at literally everything, and we compare everything on that check. So handwriting styles, does Derek always write in cursive? Does he write in print? Fonts, if it's a business check or a machine printed check, what type of font? What size is the font? Is it camel case? Is it always capitals? Is it lowercase? We compare all of that. The borders, the security features, padlocks, cameras, different signatures. We also do things, if it's through mobile, we do check liveness, meaning is this a picture of a picture or is it a picture of a check? We can actually tell the difference in real time and kind of let you know as a score. Also, I keep mentioning memo line because memo line to me it's funny, but at the same time, it's a great indicator of fraud. If they're putting approved payment or authorized payment, 99.9% of the time it's fraud. So you're able to leverage that. That's a newer one that's being added. So Mitek at the Check Fraud Defender, we are always adding in new detectors, new features, new ideas, because fraud keeps, morphing and changing. So we're trying to we're trying to keep up with it and kind of keep going. And just a couple takeaways, right, before we kind of move on. Bank branches remain an important part of the journey. Fraud prevention versus detection is no longer optional. Customer experience is number one. So shutting it down, again, at the branch before it becomes in clearing, it's very important. Traditional brick and mortar establishments are becoming targets. And again, not only, yes, we can train our frontline employees and, by the end of the day, they're tellers. I was a teller. I know, to me, you can only expect your tellers to be able to dig in so much until you need to bring assistance to them and help them catch that fraud. With moving in and kind of adding in new technology, you need to find something in a company that's investing and kind of trying to stay ahead of the trends and what's happening. I need to find a company that's looking and watching the fraudsters and learning what they're doing and trying to come up with ways not only to prevent it, but that offers like an omni-channel experience, meaning all the channels are covered and it's not just a one-channel shop. And last but not least, consortiums are allowing FIs to work together to combat evolving fraud tactics. It's important because, as we know, fraudsters are doing the same thing. So while they're working together to kind of commit fraud, we should be working together to prevent it.
Excellent. I think that moves us into our Q&A portion of the webinar where y'all, our audience, can ask Derek any of the questions that you have about today's topic. Now, before we do dive into audience questions, we have one final poll question, which should be popping up on your screen, asking if you would like to get in touch with RiskScout or the team at Mitek to help out with any of the BSA, AML, or fraud problems facing your institution today. While this is up, just as a reminder, if you want to ask us a question, you can use that questions section of the control panel on the side of your screen. I know we're limited on time here, so if we don't have time to answer your question live on the call, no worries at all. We're always happy to follow up after the fact, make sure that you're getting all the answers that you need. So thank you so much for that. Derek, I know we did talk a lot about frontline staff and how that can be such an important aspect of really fighting back against these fraud trends that we're seeing. We had a question come in and say, ask if you have any resource recommendations or training recommendations for that frontline staff to better educate them on how they can catch and escalate check fraud. Do you have any recommendations on that front?
I do. So I, as part of what I've been working on here is I've actually been putting some documentation together around helping tellers just to help them look for certain pieces and certain things. That's something I can always send out to you, Ethan, to kind of be able to make available. It focuses mostly around things like U.S. Treasury checks, which supposedly they're going away, but it gives good insights into what to look for and compare. I can provide that. I'm a member of the IAFCI, so there's some stuff there that's always available. There's a lot of different banking organizations out there that are trying to help in the fight against fraud, and they offer free materials and things like that. So there are definitely good resources out there that can be leveraged, and we can pass along some links there as well.
Yeah, that's great to hear. As a reminder, we'll be sending out all of our follow-up resources in email tomorrow. And a lot of those are already in our handout section now. Mitek has provided some really excellent white papers and some infographics that help illustrate some of those points. And Derek, I'll make sure I pass that one along as well. Definitely want to make sure all of our audience today can get as many of those resources as possible. So to Derek, your point, we can work together to fight back against these fraud trends. That's really excellent. I think we got time for one more question that came in here. Somebody asked, they were curious how you actually got access to those Telegram messages that you showed, as they seem like they would be a really helpful addition when we're building a case and filing that SAR against a scammer. Derek, can you share any insights there?
I can, and I actually have a presentation that was given to me by a fraud group I'm in that I can also pass along. When I say that a lot of these groups are open, if you download Telegram and search slips, for example, you're going to find channels that are offering checks for sale. It's that easy. It's gotten to the point, again, there's a lot of fraudsters that don't even try to hide it. I'm part of channels that I've never even said one word on before, but they've never kicked me out, and I've been in them for over a year. To them, it's that fine line of, well, if I have 10,000 people in my channel, I look legit, or I look like a big player in this game, so I'm not going to kick them out. I would love to have conversations and talk to you and kind of show you examples. I mean, people can feel free to reach out to me. It's more of a hobby for me, just because I like to know what's going on in the industry and kind of what we're up against. But we can have discussions about Telegram, and I do it on my own cell phone. So it's not like you have to buy different technology to do it. You can literally do it on your own phone.
That's great advice. Yeah, Derek, if you actually want to, we can jump ahead a couple slides. I think we've got you and I's contact information there in case anybody does want to reach out. Maybe a word of advice, maybe not to put Telegram on that work computer or anything like that, and stick to your personal devices, but that's excellent. Yeah, our contact information is there if anyone would like to reach out for additional resources. Now, I do think that is all the time that we have for today. I want to extend a big thank you to Derek and to Mitek Systems for sharing all their expertise and wisdom with us here today. Again, keep an eye on your inbox. We'll make sure that you've got the recording, the slides, all of the handouts that are inside of the handouts right now coming into your inbox tomorrow morning for your convenience. We do also have a brief survey following today's webinar where we'd love to capture a little bit of feedback and just hear your thoughts on today's webinar session to help us prepare better for future webinars. So if you take a moment for that, we would greatly appreciate hearing your thoughts. If you do have any additional questions, if you want to learn more about RiskScout or about Mitek, if you want to just say hi to myself or Derek, please don't hesitate to reach out. Visit us at our website. We hope to see you on our next session. Derek, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Ethan.